Hi, I'm Judith Dreyer, and I want to thank you for joining me for this podcast series, The Holistic Nature of Us. My intent is to take us, you and I, into a better understanding of the concepts behind our holistic nature and how that ties directly to the holistic nature of the world around us. How can we connect the dots in practical ways that we are nature and nature is in us? I will be featuring authors and educators, practitioners, and others whose passion for this earth helps us create bridges. We'll see what's trending, what's relevant to our world today, not just for land use, but to connect the dots between ourselves and nature. It's time for practical action and profound inner change so our natural world is valued once again. So today I'm delighted to introduce you to Manuel. He's an ethnobotanist and associate professor of ethnobotany teaching in the botany department and the environmental studies program at Connecticut College. Hi Manuel, I'm delighted to have you here today.
Hi Judy, thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be able to share my knowledge. So.
Yes, and I would like to start with you introducing us to the topic of ethnobotany. Most people don't really understand what that means, and how did you get into it, what inspired you about the field, and so forth.
Yes, ethnobotany is a science that combines the field of anthropology and botany, and it's about the relationship of people with the plant world. And most ethnobotanists work with indigenous peoples whose botany has not been studied by the Western science, and the knowledge is transmitted orally. So it's really an ancient field because we started really in historical times, although the word was coined over 100 years ago. And the father of the modern science of ethnobotany is Richard Van Scholtes, who was a professor at Harvard. And the reason that ethnobotany gains such importance is that the knowledge of plants that are held in mind of Indigenous people is pretty extensive. And some societies knows up to 2,000 species of plants in their uses. And today is important because it really leads to a door to use resources that were not available in the past. Although in the past we gain a great privilege to the knowledge of plants from other people. From, for example, with the discovery of quinine as a medicine for malaria in Peru, to finding the best sources of rubber in the Amazon, that really fueled the Industrial Revolution and made possible to our Industrial Revolution to happen. To even in recent times, for example, looking at plants that are drought resistance, for example. Even this year, there was an interesting article in the New York Times about this red rice was found in Trinidad. That was part of the treasure that African slave from Ghana brought to Georgia state. And in 1812, this rice disappeared and was recently found in Trinidad, which is a drought-resistant rice and also can grow on poor soil. Then how I got, yeah.
Now those are great qualities, aren't they? Because we've created a lot of kind of desert locations on our planet because of our practices. So to have a drought-resistant plant that can grow in poor soil is a plus.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, especially today with this climatic change, of the world.
Yes.
And the other question you asked is how I got into that. It was just by accident. I was a grad student at UC Berkeley in California in the late 80s. And my advisor was Brand Berlin, who's still alive, and he was an ethnobotanist, and I realized that even though I was afraid of science and I felt I was not very good in science, I ventured because I realized that the study of plants known by Indigenous peoples was important for the future. So I chose, and also the other side of the story is that my father was an anthropologist, and he made a first contact with an indigenous group in Venezuela in the 60s, and the Bari people who live in the border between Venezuela and Colombia. And I was planning to study them from demographic aspects, but then I realized that no one studied their knowledge of plants. And as a kid, I remember going in the rainforest with the Bari people, and I could see that they were able to recognize different plants. In fact, I was walking with them in the forest, and they also pick up some shoots of a plant that looked like a ginger, and they were eating the young shoots, almost like a palm heart flavor. So I was intrigued by their knowledge. So I shifted and decided to study the knowledge in the late 80s. And in fact, recently I finished a book chapter on a book on editing on the ethnoprimatology of the New World. And my chapter is about the Bari people and the knowledge of their trees that provide food for monkeys. And when I was writing this chapter, I discovered that the monkeys consume 102 species of trees, almost half of the species of trees that I identified. And I also did 12 hectares of forest plotted. I discovered that 2/3 of the trees on those plots have been their food for monkeys. And I realized monkeys were not just consuming the fruit, they're also dispersing it. So just to show that the ethnobotany it really expands not only to the use of plants, but also to the service that plants serve to nature, to monkeys, and all the aspects. So yes, it's a growing field even today. So, and here in New England, I have been working with a colleague on the knowledge of plants by the local First Nation, the local tribes, and we have now a list of about 312 species of plants used by the tribes. So.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that knowledge is not being lost. We've lost so many of our elders, in the local tribes. At least the ones that I studied with are gone. And they weren't really there to teach me so much about plants as about a way of life, a philosophy of life, to remind me about our connection to nature. So I've always been searching for local native folks to extend my knowledge of the plants, and that's so exciting to hear that you're preserving it, that you've done it with the Bari people of Venezuela as well as local here in Connecticut with our tribes. Very, very interesting. Ethnobotany, as you said, deals with anthropology and botany. How do you relate the research that you do to our everyday life from the place of creating a holistic framework, creating sustainability, having reverence for the plants and trees? What has been your experience on those levels?
That's a very good question. That's how to answer this. One way is that I got also interested in working with indigenous peoples like the Bari. Is that I admire the ability to be able to make things, to be producers, and I was also as a kid fascinated about their technology, especially the bows and arrows. So as a teenager, I started collecting them, and eventually in 1986 1988, I met Boyer, someone who makes bows and arrows in Berkeley, California, Tim Baker, who showed me how to make them. And I started making them, and I realized I discovered a new world, that making things out of plants is such an empowerment of ourselves in a different relation to the environment, to nature. And also, I was writing my thesis at the time I was learning to make bows and arrows. So it was a great break from getting away from writing and shooting arrows.
Right.
But the making of them, to me, was really very engaging, and to be able to convert a piece of wood into a bow was really an art. But also, I realized it requires a lot of knowledge. No, I did break many bows, and some fail, and I was trying to figure out what is the ultimate bow, what I need to do exactly. So in the making of them, I realized that the art or science of making bows is very complex. And then when I was making bows, I was learned to make my strings too, from fibers, from hemps, linen, as well as adding wax and braiding them. And then also I started making my own arrows. And eventually, when I was here in Connecticut, teaching at college since 1998, my wife said it would be nice to teach the students in ethnobotany and other skills beside what I was learning. So she said, "Why don't you pick up making baskets?" So I started learning to make baskets, and I learned from a basket maker, and eventually I was teaching my students. And one time in a conference, this was in 2003, I met Iroquois man, David Richard, who showed me how to make the baskets out of brown ash, the traditional way that the New England tribe made baskets. And that's the two skills I got the most. And eventually I started making wine, beer, but then also looking at the uses of other plants, like making maple syrup, and also looking at medicinal plants, although I rarely get sick myself, so it's like I never mastered the art of making medicine very well. But I discovered that in this forest here, we have plenty of very good resources, and in trying to make things, I discovered that as I mentioned to you personally, that it was empowering in the sense that you transform yourself from being a consumer to a producer. But also when you make things, you discover that things that you buy takes time and resources to make. So when you make your basket or your bowls, you start to preserve or conserve resources, and not abuse of them. And you start being aware of your impact to the environment.
Well, that's a really key point, I think, to get across. We take so much for granted, don't we, with our products out there. I just saw a YouTube video put out by the BBC in the Caribbean. There's a huge tract of water that's just littered with garbage. It's not pretty. It's hurting the coral reefs. If you go underwater and scuba dive, you see nothing but plastic bags. And we forget that while these inventions seem good in the moment, we haven't really played it forward. You know, my native elders taught me what we do affects the next 7 generations. So making a basket from a natural weed that's a renewable resource and doing it with our own hands and taking the time to do it, we don't have to go shopping as much, right?
Right, that's true. So, yeah, it's one thing I did a couple of baskets for my kids, even though I was late for Christmas. So, I made 2 baskets, one for my daughter and one for my son. And my daughter and I, we don't buy a present, we make presents and exchange that. I think that they value that much more, and I do value my daughter's work. She likes to spin wool and knit, and so she makes all my socks. So and it's just and as you mentioned that when all this trash is like this 17 billion tons of plastic that is tossed in the oceans is terrible for our environment. I think that in a sense they're trying to move away from consuming and wasteful the waste that consumption produces, because when you're a consumer you're not aware of the impact on the environment as you are a producer, because you see what the materials come from and what happened to them. So much more clear.
And I bet you get a sense of the ecosystem where you find them too. In the world of herbalism, which is one of my passions, we always teach folks to look at the environment where you find a plant, and if it's the strongest one there, don't take it. That's the mother plant, the grandmother plant that's trying to keep the plant species going in that particular area. So we don't have that kind of awareness either, but I imagine with your work, making baskets, making bows, you're keenly aware of the ecosystem that you're taking from.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also I'm a bow hunter and a spear fisherman, so I can see the impact of my actions in nature too. So, and being aware that we need to really limit our consumption sometimes.
I agree with you. Years ago, I met, there was a camp near where I had a health food store, and the counselors were, joking around when they came in on one of their breaks, and they were telling me they have a song called "Where Is Away?" And it's all about relating to garbage. We throw things away, but where is away?
Yeah, no, definitely so.
Which I thought was pretty cool and timely, and has a great impact on the children to get them thinking too. To increase their awareness and their respect for the environment.
Yeah, especially in our daily living, that we put things in trash. We take our trash outside for the morning, and it's gone. We don't see where it goes. So
that's true.
And then you mentioned something about the strongest plant in nature. Yeah, some societies have developed systems in which they prevent overusing. Like one of the Mohegan elders, Sharon Manuel, told me that they were taught that when you go to nature and look for plants, you don't collect the first one. You leave the first one there, because if you collect the first one, and if the first one was the last one, then they will be gone. So
exactly.
So it's in some societies will go in and just harvest like this every third one. So the different societies have developed sustainable systems of avoiding a negative impact to nature. So and all societies have developed even seasonalities, or like the Bari people, they won't hunt spider monkeys unless it is in a fruiting season. So like the appearance of what they call the baro, which is a hog plum, Spondia mombis, it's a scientific name of this tree. And that highlights the seasonality of hunting monkeys. But yeah, this so different societies have developed ways to preserve the resources. Like here in New England, one of the fantastic plants I found, I don't know if you know it, is ramp.
Yes.
And it's just, but if you harvest it, in fact, it's becoming. I remember hearing one time in NPR a program about this Japanese American chef from New York who was specialized on harvesting wild plants in northern New York, and she mentioned that in New England about 11 million ramps are collected each year. So yeah, they're hard to find. And in fact, you don't supposed to collect, but less than 10% of what you find. Yeah, when I go collect ramp, I don't collect even a tuber. I leave the tuber in the ground, so it will continue. I only collect half of the leaves. And the patches that I have been harvesting, they're doing well in that sense. Also, I've been trying to disperse, collecting some of the tubers and replanting in different places. So I'm trying to propagate them.
Right, and they take a while to propagate, don't they?
Yeah.
They need to be in the ground for a few years.
Yeah, definitely. So it's like a little onion, and size of a peanuts. And but I noticed that the ones I planted in my garden, just to see how they're doing, they're doing okay. But I remember hearing somewhere that you have to collect the seeds, which so there's another way to prepare it. But the patches I've been seeing, they're doing really well, but they're very small. There are a few of them. So around New London, so.
Well, the Appalachian region has huge ramp festivals, and when I lived down in Virginia for a couple of years, I heard that they were very, very concerned about the ramp populations because it became a fad for chefs, and these festivals were popping up all over the place, and they were really destroying some established areas for ramps, almost to the point of annihilating it from specific areas. So I know there's a different level of education going on about the ramps, so I appreciate you reminding, my listeners, to, if they know ramp, to collect it mindfully, follow your suggestions, only take 10%, leave the tubers, don't take all the leaves. Those are things that we need to keep reminding ourselves so that we can be more sustainable in our wildcrafting practices.
Yeah, no, definitely. So it's important.
Well, everybody wants to know what your favorite plant is.
Oh, my favorite plants? That's a good question. I have so many. Tomatoes. I have to say that tomatoes. I love tomatoes, and sometimes we grow in our garden 7, 8 different varieties. And I think tomatoes are really, especially in the summer, they're really provide incredible amount of nutrients and vitamin C. So, and they're not hard to grow. And also you can make tomato sauce and preserve it for the year. So, my other one I like is cabbage. So, and sometimes we make sauerkraut or kimchi, and that's. But I think my favorite plant now that I'm talking, that I overuse sometimes is leek. Which combines the flavor of garlic and onions and can be used as a green. So when I go to Venezuela, my mother knows. She likes me to cook, and she has a little garden, and the person who maintains the garden always is asked to grow a lot of leek for me because I'm constantly adding on the food. So in Venezuela, there's one plant that probably no one of your listeners probably know. It's called sachafruto or chachafruto, which is a large bean. Was used by Indigenous peoples in Colombia as an emergency food when their cornfields failed. And this bean, Inga edulis, is the scientific name, is about a foot long, and the beans themselves are the size of probably almost the size of a walnut, from olive to walnuts. It has 17% protein, so and it's just, and it tastes like it's hard to say. It's almost like a combination of gnocchi and egg. So, and every time I cook, I go to Venezuela. My sister, my mom, and my brother ask me to go to the field. It doesn't. It's a small tree that doesn't grow more than probably 20 feet, 18 feet tall, and live probably 10, 15 years. They produce a lot of fruits, and they grow on the trunk and the branches. So, but this past January, I learned that you have to collect is the seeds are not fully mature, but the ones are halfway mature. They're very tender. It's almost like they melt in your mouth. So. But you can see that I don't have no specific plants, several plants. So,
Well, that's great though, because you know how to use them, you know how to grow them. You also know when to pick them. This is it's a new food for me. I've never heard of. Is it called sacha fruto?
Such a fruit, yeah, unfortunately doesn't travel well because the bean ferments and decomposes very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't dry like the typical bean. That's one thing about such a fruto. So,
And I'm assuming with your study of ethnobotany that these are cultural foods that are in certain areas, and that's what the local folks use, but it's also something that's been passed down and has lasted for centuries, so it's part of their culture. Am I correct in that?
yeah. So definitely, the foods, well, according to the French, you are what you eat, right? Not the Germans. And the French will tell me what you eat, I'll tell you who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, food is always part of the culture. And food is attached to a land and to a region. So as particular plants are associated to particular regions. Like, for example, we cannot conceive Mexico without chocolate, right? Or chili pepper. So
right.
If you travel to Chiapas, San Cristobal de las Casas in Mexico, and go to the markets, you will see sellers selling you all different type of chipotles, from red to dark brown chipotles, the ground powder of smoke, chili pepper, which are rich in flavors, and then also we need to be aware of the international side of that too, or the virtual crime when you buy chocolates that's produced in Africa with child slavery to buying, for example, quinoa from Bolivia. In fact, I learned this sadly recently. I love quinoa, which is an incredible plant. Also, it has a high percentage of protein. I think 17% to 17%. And quinoa is also an important food for indigenous peoples in Bolivia. But the fact that Europe and North America have been buying quinoa from Bolivia has increased the price to 5 times what it used to cost for indigenous people, so they cannot afford it anymore in Bolivia. So that's the sad part of ethnobotany. Is like we have fat, we can buy things, but we have to be aware of not only the ecological impact, but also the social impact to other peoples in the third world.
Well, that's a really good point, because again, we don't see it in our supermarkets, do we? We just see these pretty packages, we get the food, we get to make what we want. At least here in New England, I know it's not true in some parts of the world, but at least we have this abundance here, but we forget where they come from and who it does impact culturally, socially, and economically. Very good point. Very good point. Well, Manuel, how about, could you give us 3 practical tips or advice that our listeners can use in everyday life, based on your wisdom from ethnobotany, your wisdom from being a producer, not a consumer?
3 tips. Well, as I mentioned, be informed and aware of the impacts of the plants you're consuming or any other resources. Trying to also, I think that one thing that is an important art for all of us to practice is have a garden, plant a garden, and trying to grow your food locally. As well as support local farmers and local resources that are produced in the area. So, and pick up an art of trying to make things. So I think that making things is just very empowering. I speak of basket making, or there's furniture making, and so many things we can do. So many resources here. Like in New England, we have so much wood available, and you can make so many things, like make spoons, or wood balls, which also make out of black walnut. So trying to make things and trying to reduce your consumption of good. If you're consuming something, trying to make sure what you're consuming is organically and fair trade, or know the producer. So, and those are my recommendations. So.
Well, those are good ones. Those are good ones for all of us to remember. And again, folks, we'll have this in the transcript for your review. Manuel, it's been a pleasure to speak with you today. I think ethnobotany gives all of us an understanding that society and plants have always been connected. You know, we need food, and we need to make things from nature, and that tells us something about our culture, where we come from, and also keeps us connected to the land. So I want to thank you for reminding us about all the beautiful things that you do and the teaching that you do, and I'm sure your students are just as inspired as I am. Could you give us your contact information before we close off?
Yes, very much. Yeah, you can. The best way to contact me is through email, and my email is liz at concoll.edu. We stand for Con College. So it's my first initial, my name, Manuel, M, and the first three letters of my last name, Liz, at CONNCOLL.
That's great. And I want our listeners to know that you've written many papers. You're working on a book. You're working on the chapter of this book that you just mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. So you have lots of resources out there.
Yeah, I will be able to share some of this material. The book I'm not sharing yet because it's not finished. I need
right.
And I'm hoping to get a sabbatical, so I won't be teaching after the next academic year, and trying to finish this book with Jason Mancini, who is the co-author.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, I want to say thank you again for joining us at the Holistic Nature of Us, and I hope you folks feel as inspired as I do by Manuel Lizarralde's talk and practical advice. And I can't thank you enough for your time. I know you're a busy man, and I want to thank you for joining us today. So this is Judith Dreyer, author of At the Garden's Gate book and blog. For more information, go to my website, judithdreyer.com. You will find information for this podcast as well as the transcript. And then you will also find information for my book, blog, and class schedules. I like to end the Holistic Nature of Us with a quote from Paul Hawken. He's an environmentalist and author who reminds us, sustainability, ensuring the future life on Earth, is an infinite game, the endless expression on behalf of all. Enjoy, everyone, and have a great day.